From Anshe Sfard Bethel Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Haggadah highlights. I'd like to start a series from the commentary of Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi, a 16th century rabbi who lived both in Sephardic and Ashkenazic countries, and who had the privilege of having met the Mechaber, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, of the Code of Jewish Law, Rabbi Yosef Karo, and also the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, who lived in Krakow. Now, in this commentary, known as the Maseh Hashem, and he also has a commentary on Megillat Esther, which we read during Purim, he goes through the entire Haggadah. Let's get started. The beginning of the Haggadah, it says, Halach ma'anya. It says that this is the bread of affliction, and it talks in Aramaic. And it says that we ate this in Egypt, and anybody who's hungry should come and eat, and this year we're here, next year we'll be in Israel. There are many questions about this passage. Firstly, why in Aramaic? Secondly, how can you invite people to a Seder? In the original Seders, you couldn't invite people because you would invite them prior to Pesach, but once you slaughter the Paschal Lamb on the eve of Pesach, you could no longer have any other guests as part of that Paschal Lamb. Those who were included in that particular lamb could be invited. Those who were not could not be invited. So you can't invite someone at the last minute. It doesn't make any sense. And furthermore, sitting at the table, we're going to be inviting a guest. The meal is starting in 5 minutes. Who are you inviting? You talking to the people at the table that they can eat dinner with you? What are you talking to? So what's really going on? Comes Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi, and he says, you know what this is? It's a kina. It's a lament. Like on Tisha B'Av, it's a lament. You know why it's in Aramaic? You want everyone to understand, even those who were illiterate, perhaps in those days, perhaps some of the women didn't understand Hebrew, maybe they'd understand Aramaic, and you want them to weep and wail over the destruction of the temple, the fact that this Seder is missing so much. Where's the beef? Where's the Paschal Lamb? And therefore, you know why we talk about inviting? Because since in the times of the temple, you could not invite someone at the last minute, because whoever was not included in the Paschal Lamb on the eve of Passover could not be included at the Seder. But now we can invite. And that very idea that you could invite others to the Seder now, that is the lament. The lament is the Paschal Lamb isn't here. And all those laws are gone. Second reason it's in Aramaic is that since this is not really part of the Haggadah, the real Haggadah starts with Manishtana, with the questions. And this is a foreign substance. Therefore, we put it in Aramaic to be clear. The Haggadah starts when we go into the Hebrew. This part is an addendum to it because we are now in exile. That's his comment on the very first paragraph of the Haggadah. Then we turn our attention to the Manishtana. And he asks, what is it? Why these particular questions? What are they all about? And he has a very clever interpretation that actually the four questions correspond to the four sons. The four sons. He says, there's a concept that's in the Talmud regarding checking the lungs of an animal for kosher purposes. There's yatir or chasir or chalif. There could be two problems. One is that there could be too much flesh. There could be something missing on the lung, and there could be something that switched. And in general, when a person is making an observation about something, you could notice that which is excessive, that which is missing, or that which switched out from something else. So therefore, he says, the wise son says, I'm not just wise intellectually, but I live an ascetic kind of life. I don't eat more than I need to. I don't do more pleasurable things than I need to. And what is this business? That tonight there are shnei tibulim that we're dipping twice, that we're dipping extra times. What is this all about? There's too many things. What's going on? Then the wicked person is not just wicked regarding the mitzvot, but he's also a glutton, and as such, he gets upset when there's something missing, when there's one of the courses is not there. So he sees there's no bread tonight. He's upset about that. There's something missing here. Now, the simple son, the difference between bread, matzah, one dipping, two dipping, that's lost on him. But as a simple son, he notices extreme differences. So the maror, that's something he notices. And he says, yuck, this is so bitter. What is this? What are we doing here? So that he notices. Now, anyone who will not ask a question after having seen a difference in the fact that there's too much, there's too little, there are things that are changed out, that are different, that have been exchanged, like the maror instead of more sweet things. And then you do something very blatant and obvious. Everyone starts leaning on their left, leaning on these beds like we're some sort of Roman symposium or something. At that point, if you don't ask any questions, you are clearly the Eino Yodei Lishol, clearly the son who, under any circumstance, never has anything to ask, and we try to answer it for him. Then he mentions that regarding this, the two dippings, by the way, why do we have two dippings? So he says that the two dippings allude to the two dippings in history. One dipping was the unfortunate dipping of the brothers when they dipped the coat of Joseph in the blood. And the more fortunate later dipping, as a tikkun, as a fixing of the first, was when we dipped the hyssop in the blood of the lamb, Paschal lamb, and put it on the doorpost as a sign that the angel of death should go away. And that's a part of the illusion of the dipping, the two dippings. That's why we have two dippings. Finally, he talks about avadim hayinu Pharaoh, that we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Now he says, firstly, why do we have to mention Paro? I mean, we were slaves in Egypt. Who cares if it was Paro? What do we need to talk about him for? We don't mention Moses. Why should we mention Paro? And then the other question is, how is this an answer to the four questions? We just asked four questions, and then we say we were slaves in Egypt. What does it have to do with how many times we're dipping or leaning or all the kind of things? Furthermore, in some texts of the Haggadah, it says the following contradiction. It says, mitzvah leinu saper, it's a mitzvah to tell the story. And then it says, kol ha-mesaper harei zeh meshubach. Anybody who tells the story, that's wonderful. But what I understand, is it a mitzvah or is it a wonderful? Is it something, it's very nice, it's praiseworthy? Or is it an obligation? So what's going on here? So the answer he gives is based on the last question. The last of the question says, how come tonight kulanu mesubim? We're all bowing down. On other nights we don't. We're all leaning. On other nights we don't lean. What is the essence of this question? The question is, one of the worst things you can do in Judaism is to be haughty, a braggart. Moses was an exemplar of Judaism. He was modest. It says in Ethics of the Fathers, you should be very, very modest. You do not want to be haughty. And yet, to lean and recline is the most haughty kind of thing. You think somehow you're some kind of Roman emperor or something like that. So he says, how can we possibly do that? So he says, well, let me explain. You might think that we should really hold our heads low and sunken and sullen. Why? Because we were slaves in Egypt, and then Paro let us out. And now we're meshubadim. We're not just avadim, slaves, we're meshubadim. We're indebted to Paro forever because he let us out. So we say, Paro let us out. And we say, had we not gotten out of Egypt through a strong hand where God forced us out, and it wasn't Paro, but Paro was forced to let us out, so we don't owe anything to him. Had God not done the Exodus in that way, forcing Paro's hand, then we would still be indebted to Paro to this day. And therefore, since, not to Paro, that person, but even to his children, to the name Paro, the title Paro, the position in Egypt known as Paro, we'd be indebted forever. But since God took us out with a strong hand, therefore we're no longer indebted. Therefore there's nothing to be ashamed of. Therefore we don't have to bury our heads in shame, but rather we can be thankful and we can be prideful. And that's why it says anyone who tells the story is praiseworthy as opposed to degraded for being obligated toward the one who let us out, meaning a human being. But since it's God, therefore we're not indebted to any human being. We don't want to be indebted to a person. And therefore we're not mishuabad to them. We're not ingratiated. We are not indebted forever to humans. And therefore we can truly rejoice, and we can sort of not be haughty, but we can relax and feel that we don't owe any human being for our salvation. So these were three interpretations of the three first sections of the Haggadah, each one a nuanced interpretation, something a little different. And we'll continue studying the works of Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi throughout this period prior to Pesach, the 30-day period prior to Pesach. We hope you've enjoyed. We hope you will enjoy. We hope everyone should have a Chag Kosher V'Sameach, a wonderful Pesach. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit ASBEE.org.